talking about the tax credit, but we're going to talk about everything here and what the effect will be on individual taxpayers in the city. So how much do different revenue enhancement approaches generate? Who pays under the different approaches? So why do cities have the authority and obligation to impose an income tax? Well, the city that hosts the job has to provide services to the business and to the people that work in the business: roads, police, fire, EMS. Same is true for people that live in a city. Where you live, that city provides you, the city of Riverside provides you road services, EMS, fire, and police, and that has to be paid for somehow. So my view is that where you work has a right to tax you, where you live has the right and an obligation to tax you to provide those services, if you want those services. So let's just take a quick look at this. Is how, these are sources of revenue on the left, or expenses on the right in general. Really, there's only two that we control: city income tax and city real estate tax. We could add assessments in there if we ever were to go that way, but we're going to keep it clean and just talk about those two things tonight. Okay, there are three types of Riverside residents with taxable income. Riverside residents that work in Riverside, they pay 1.5%. Riverside residents who work in a city whose income tax rate is less than 1.5%, they pay between 0 and 1.5% to the city of Riverside in income tax.
Why do they pay 0? Who pays 0?
I'd like to know that.
Well, I should have said.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you live in a city, if you work in a city that charges 1%, you're going to pay 0.5% to the city of Riverside. Generally speaking, the only two cities that really matter in this discussion is Riverside and Beaver Creek for that second class there. Beaver Creek has no income tax.
Right,
So they pay us the full, people that live in Riverside pay us a full 1.5%. Those are really the only residents I'm talking about here. And the last group is Riverside residents who work in a city whose income tax rate is greater than 1.5%. They pay no Riverside income tax. So we're going to break it down into two groups. We're going to combine the green box. Those two groups are one group. The red box, that's the second group. Okay. Quick talk about city real estate tax. Who pays? It's really simple. If you own property, you pay property tax. There's no credits. Just watch. So I went out and I pulled my tax duplicate up for my property tax. You can see the value of my house there. And then you can see the breakdown of where the taxes go, where my property taxes go. Some of them go to Montgomery County. Some of them go to Mad River School District, but the majority of them go to Mad River School District. Some of them go to Riverside, and some go to the Dayton Metro Library. And here's the breakout. I currently pay $261.52 a year in property tax to the city of Riverside. $1,250, rounded off, goes to Mad River Schools. $612 goes to Montgomery County, and $53 a year goes to the library, which is going to go up now. Okay, so where do the property taxes go? 12% of your property tax comes to the city of Riverside. The rest of it goes elsewhere. Okay, so who pays? About 2,500 people live in Riverside and work in Riverside, pay the full Riverside income tax of 1.5%. They belong in Group 1. That's how many people live in Riverside and work in Riverside. About 1,850 people live in Riverside, work elsewhere, and pay full or partial Riverside income tax. They're also in Group 1. Same, it's just like I showed before. Who doesn't pay because of 100% income tax? About 5,200 people live in Riverside who work elsewhere, pay no Riverside income tax because of the 100% income tax credit. here's your graph. 55% of our residents that have income don't pay income tax. 45% have to bear the entire load in terms of residents of that. I'm not talking about people that live elsewhere, I'm talking about my residents.
And that's
Those are the only people that I represent. Okay, so that's the breakdown. And it's, well, just remember that graph and think about the meaning of that. That means that if we were ever to go to the ballot to ask people to vote for a decrease in the income tax credit, they're not gonna support it. But if you ask those same 55% to raise the taxes of that other 45%, they're probably gonna say yes. So, when I'm done, you can ask questions. Okay, so here's the current situation. I want to compare the total tax revenue contributions of the two taxpayer groups created by the income tax credit to the city of Riverside. Group 1 pays 1.5% income tax to Riverside. Group 2 pays no income tax to Riverside. And the assumptions for both groups, property tax for both groups, if they own a house like mine, they pay $261 a year for property tax. And I'm assuming salary of $50,000. That's what my subsequent examples are going to use.
Isn't that kind of confusing the two together, property tax and?
Yeah,
Well,
that's not true.
let me go. What?
What was a $50,000?
Average income.
But they still pay $261 in property tax.
Agreed. Everybody that has a house like mine pays $261 in property tax to the city of Riverside.
So I'm not sure.
Well, you'll see where I'm going. Okay, so now we want to add these things up. So property tax plus income tax equals how much tax a resident is paying to the city of Riverside. So we got $1,000 for the group 1, the people that are paying the income tax. And the other, group 2 is only paying $262 a year into the city for all the services that we provide to them. The other people are paying 3.5 times more than the non-tax paying group. And plus, or you can look at it another way, group 1 pays $750 more per year than group 2. So group 1 subsidizes group 2 for the services provided by the city of Riverside. I think that's.
And there could be two people in one household.
Absolutely, but I'm just assuming.
So it could be even more.
It could.
It could be even worse than this.
It could, but I'm just gonna assume.
Okay.
Make some basic assumptions here. All right, so graphically, that's what it looks like. Group 1, the people that pay taxes, that's what it looks like. It's a big disparity. It's almost a factor of 4. Those people pay 4 times more taxes to the city of Riverside than group 2. So we really have 3 options to increase revenue going forward. We can lower the tax credit by 50%. We can raise the income tax from 1.5 to 2%. We can raise property taxes. I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think we're going to raise property taxes.
That's not up to us.
Sure it is. We could put that on ballot.
You actually have the ability to increase your inside millage rate as many as 9 mills legislatively. You don't have to take property tax increase to the ballot.
So,
That's correct.
all right, so we can do it either way.
That is correct.
Yeah, and that's fine. But I don't think anybody has a stomach to do that right now, or raise it, or it's, I mean, that's seen nowadays as that's where the school gets their money. The other is to raise the income tax from 1.5 to 2%. Put that in yellow because, yeah, I'm not so sure about that one. The other one in green is to lower the tax credit by 50%. Okay. So, now this is the effect on business. Going forward, what's the effect of each of these approaches on business? Well, if we lower the tax credit, that's neutral to businesses. They're not going to see any additional taxes on their profits.
Yeah.
be the profits, actually.
Yeah, well,
If we raise the income tax, that's a negative for business. That's gonna raise their taxes. Yes, it
no,
will.
just those who make money, just those income workers.
No, we're talking about business now, effect on business, not, we're talking about business, so that has a negative impact on business, and raising the property tax is the same thing. That's a negative for business. If we raise their property taxes, they go to Beaver Creek or something, I don't know. Okay, so let's look at this. So let's assume we're gonna increase the income tax to 2%. Group one, they're now gonna pay, again, based on $50,000, their tax bill's gonna go up to $1,262 a year. Group two's property tax, or total taxes is gonna remain the same. They're not gonna see an increase. Now we've even made the disparity bigger between the two groups. Now group one almost pays 5 times more than group two. And group one now pays $1,000 more a year than group two. So group one subsidizes group two even more for the services provided by the city of Riverside. Group one is people that pay income tax.
Who live in Riverside and work in Riverside.
Okay.
Or pay an income tax rate
This is
less
what
than or
music
equal to.
mayor.
That's right. So we've made the problem worse if you view this disparity as a problem. I'm not sure some of you do. So again, here's the before and after. $1,000, it goes up to 12, it stays flat for the group two. Their taxes don't go up. The other group's taxes do rise by 0.5%.
This is based on a certain amount of.
This is based on $50,000 a year.
Who makes that kind of?
Not too much. That's just an example. A lot of people do. So now let's look at the effective enhancement through the decrease of the income tax credit. Okay, here we go. Group one, their taxes aren't going to go up. They're going to remain. They're going to pay the exact same amount as they did before, $1,000 a year essentially. Their income tax will stay the same. Their property tax will stay the same. Group two, their tax is going to increase. Their income tax is going to increase. They're going to go from nothing up to $375 a year. So they're now going to be paying $637 a year to the city of Riverside. So now group one pays about 1.5 times more than group two per year than group two. So we've reduced that disparity between the two groups of taxpayers. Or said another way, group one now pays $375 more a year than group two. Again, a smaller amount. Group one now subsidizes group two less for the services provided by the city of Riverside. And in graphical form, you can see that the height of the bars is less after the tax credit reduction. In other words, people that weren't paying income taxes before are now paying income taxes and contributing more fairly to the revenue of the city to provide the services. Okay, so here's the advantages of reducing the tax credit. It generates about $700,000 per year revenue. It broadens the tax base, which is a good thing, believe it or not. It reduces the effect of other municipalities raising their income taxes. For instance, Beaver Creek's talking about a 1.5% income tax. We've estimated a loss of about $25,000 a year.
Correct.
If we were to institute this tax credit reduction, that would be reduced to about $13,000 a year, that negative impact on us. And the last thing is that it more fairly distributes the cost of providing city services among wage-earning residents in our city. So the advantages of increasing the tax rate to 2%, it generates $1.15 million a year.
You get, I have a question when you're ready.
Okay, well, let me get that, and then you can
Okay.
always go back to any slide, and you've got a copy of it there too. So what's the disadvantage of reducing the income tax credit? Well, it requires requires 55% of residents that currently pay no tax, income tax, to start contributing to the cost of the city services. And that's why I really don't think it's a good idea to put anything like that on the ballot, because those 55% are gonna vote to let those other people pay those taxes. And that's not right. Those people, no, they should vote to pay their own tax and not have somebody else pay those taxes for them. The disadvantage of increasing the income tax rate to 2% with income tax reduction, again, it's a negative impact on businesses in Riverside, and it shifts the burden to even further to the minority of Riverside residents. So who do you want to pay the services provided by the city of Riverside? Minority of wage earners and homeowners, or majority of wage earners and homeowners? Just remember, changing the income tax credit does not raise retired people's taxes if they don't have earned income. It's business neutral, it broadens the tax base, and is more fair. And those are the key things about changing the tax credit. Questions? Fire away, guys.
Okay, Ms. Kim.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of boil this down to something a little more simple. We pay 1.5. You wanna raise it 0.5? No, I'm not, I'm talking about what's going on about. You get everybody, to me, it's a confusion because you're putting the two mixed
Well, but we have to, we're talking about revenue enhancement.
Well, you wanna put on the ballot 0.5 to raise it to 2. That would be just a nickel on the dollar more, right?
To those people that pay taxes in the city.
Because not a whole lot of people make 50,000 a year, and that's what scares the heck out of me.
Well, you can use whatever number you want. I know a lot of people that make 50,000, so maybe, I don't know, I think the average income is what, about 40, 38, 40?
How about 22, 24, something like that? What's minimum wage? Figure it out per year. What is minimum wage? All people make minimum wage.
I just used that as my sample,
I
as
know,
my
but people
example.
see those high dollars and scares them off. I mean, that's my
I'm trying to
opinion.
educate you and the council and the people in the audience, and that's all I'm
Well,
trying to do.
educate me, so I'm not
Okay.
giving them $5.
Mr. Fuller, did you, I didn't see it there, did you take the numbers out further to, if we did both?
I did not, I think the city manager can probably help us out on that if we were, and let me pose it as a question to you. If we were to first lower the tax credit 50%, and then raise the income tax by 0.5%, it would now raise more than 1.15 million per year. I mean, I'm assuming it might raise somewhere in the order of 1.45, 1.5 million per year, or maybe Mr. Garrett.
Quick math would be, let's look at one action in subsequent years. So if you reduce the credit by 50% in 2013, you would generate $700,000 additional dollars. Okay. Then, let's say in November of 2013, the voters agree to raise the income tax for whatever purpose from 1.5% to 2%. You would raise an additional 1.8 million, give or take. You would see 1.46 from the income tax increase. And then you would see an additional 300,000 from the credit.
1.15. I mean, 0.5%.
When we ran, sorry, yes, so you would, I'm sorry, on the 1.15, is that the for the income tax?
That's the number for the income
Okay.
tax. So I'm just looking for the increment above that.
You would bring in, assuming that half a percent brought in 1.15, you would see 1.15 for the income tax, and you would be looking around 400,000 for the difference on the credit.
Yeah, I was saying between 350 and 400,000. So in effect, it would raise about 1.5 if we were to pass the tax credit and then
just playing with the numbers
So
over
there's
here
group three that has been forgotten.
on his, on his sheet that he didn't, bring up, is how much an individual would be actually paying out of his pocket if he lives in Riverside and works in Dayton.
They would be paying, I did show you that.
Oh, you did?
You
Absolutely.
did?
Absolutely.
It goes to.
I mean, I did it this way, in percentages.
Because you say it's fair,
But you
it's more
did the
fair,
numbers.
but
I'm
that group of
I
people
I
is
did it.
unfair to them.
I can't determine what the city of Dayton taxes workers in their city. That's something that I can't.
Like I
control.
said, but yeah, I know you can't control it, of course you can't.
And I can't
understand
let,
that.
and I can't let it control my city's
But you
revenue
gotta-
stream either.
But
But it's
goes
gotta
to-
be
There's
fairness.
how much it's gonna, the
None of
person
those
depends on
groups.
which way you
I
go,
understand
which
it.
way you
Yeah.
go.
If I might, Mr. Mayor, you make the
3%.
argument about fairness.
Understand?
Yeah.
Why should those citizens of this city who are responsible, why should this city, which is responsible in its operation of its government, be penalized because inefficiencies or failures in other governments require them to tax at higher rates? Why should we be penalized
Because
for
it's
that?
not fair. It's not fair to that person that works in another city who's have to pay at least 3% of his income now to local government. 2.25 to Dayton and now 0.75 to Riverside. That group it's unfair to them, but we can't change
this
that.
is- so
We
this
have
isn't-
nothing that we can do to change
So
that.
the question that I have isn't about the fairness of the individual.
Well, that's what
it's about
Steve's saying is
the
unfair. This whole thing was on fairness, and you didn't recognize those folks that work in another city and pay their income tax, which we can't control that.
Agreed.
We cannot control that, what they do, and they're getting a 0.75% increase.
But we need to be able
That
to,
is not fair.
we need to be able to control our revenue stream, and this does not allow us to do that.
And Mr. Mayor, it's not fair for me to have to pay a full 1.5% when if we didn't give any credit, our income tax could possibly be 1% for everybody. And we would still have a balanced book. And then everybody here would be paying 1%. Now, those
No, it's not
that
gonna
work
happen.
someplace else, that worked in Dayton would then pay 3.14 if we gave 0% credit.
I don't quite get that one.
Well, anyway,
Because they're gonna pay 3%, and everybody is high, almost everybody is higher than what we are, so no matter what city you work in, you're, as a wage earner, you're gonna get a tax increase if we pass that legislation. That's true.
Absolutely.
And I think that's not fair.
55% of the
That is
people
not
are
fair.
gonna get a tax increase. You're
That is
absolutely right.
not fair.
Well,
It was not.
again, we have to control our own destiny.
Well, I don't think it's fair that 45% of the residents carry the burden for the other 55.
They're not, they're
It just
paying,
shows they are.
they're paying a burden to Dayton, because that's
But
where they
we're,
work.
so we're not
They're
getting
still got the
anything from
burden.
them.
They still have that burden regardless of where the money goes. The burden is still on
It
them.
doesn't help
But we
us.
can't
It
get
doesn't solve our streets.
We can't get our streets paved because they're paying their money.
It's not about fair.
They're gonna do that anyway. So
If
it's
they want
not
their
fair.
street, if they want their street paved, they need to pay their share.
It's not fair, that is not fair to our citizens. Okay, someone else wanna speak?
Well, I agree with Mr. Fullman. It's very fair.
I don't
You
see
may
how
not
it's
like
fair.
it because you don't feel it's fair, but I don't feel it's fair for 45% of the people to carry the burden.
You know what, you spend 16 hours in your city.
Exactly.
Okay? What are you doing those 16 hours? You're sleeping, you're eating dinner, you're maybe working in the yard. You know, you're not using our services. A person who works here is bending over, maybe frying, maybe, working at a desk. He's working, he
Wait a minute.
needs our
I pay
services.
those taxes.
Well,
He needs our
Well,
services.
I do
Give an
use
example.
those services. I do use those services during those 16 hours. I have police protection 24 hours,
and fine.
okay? So I have peace of mind for those 16 hours that I'm here. If I worked in Dayton, I wouldn't have that same peace of mind. Or if I lived in Dayton, I wouldn't have that same peace of
Well,
mind.
you raise our income tax that much.
Okay,
we're
hold
gonna
on.
take.
I also use the fire department if I need it. probably I have more chance of my house catching on fire when I'm cooking over my stove than when it's shut off and I'm not there. So the 16 hours that I am at my home, or my grandson is in my front yard, or I'm out mowing my grass and trip on something, I have more of a chance to use the services that we have in this city. And
Not as much as if you're working 8 hours straight, doing something that.
I don't know what you're basing that comment on.
Well, give you an
It's not
example,
a
Mr.
good-
Mayor. One call to the fire department is gonna cost more than $262
Yeah.
that you're paying a year in income tax, in real estate tax. One call to the fire department is gonna cost you more than $262.
About 800.
By the time
But
you count
it's-
personnel,
So
wages, training.
you have accidents out on the
Equipment.
road, you have all these things that are happening
Exactly,
during working hours.
that's right.
And that's why, and we have to
And we
take
have
care
to
of our
provide
roads
services
so they
to-
can get in here.
To those people that come through our community.
And those that work in our community, so we have to provide those services for them. That's the reason
And they pay their 1.5% here already. Those people that work here and live someplace else pay their 1.5% here.
Well, and
So
that's
they're
right,
paying
and
their
that's
share.
okay.
They're paying their share.
Okay, that's
Okay.
okay, and that's why it's fair to do that.
Okay.
Okay,
So, Mr.
that's a nice argument. But you know, now let's fall back to what Mr. Kirk has brought up.
Yeah.
And we know that last council meeting, that ordinance failed to increase it on there. Now we have an alternate plan, and I think we should bring that alternate plan forward. And get the legislation forward and get it on the ballot.
Okay, that's your motion?
No, that's not my motion, I'm just saying.
Bring legislation.
Well,
Well, yeah, that's what we need to do.
I think we
And
need to think it through. make
no,
sure
no, no,
we know
no,
what
no,
we're
no.
doing with it.
We're not gonna think it through. We've been thinking it through for, Mr. Kirk's right. We're a bunch of procrastinators when it comes to raising, taxes. We are. And that's, we don't like doing it. We don't even like putting it on the ballot, for you people to vote on it. But we're procrastinators. But we can't procrastinate any longer.
Yeah,
On there.
since
And we're just gonna have to put it on the ballot and, let the voters decide if they want to raise their income tax by 0.50%, period, with a reduction of 2 mils. Now, if you wanna,
We're gonna vote on the 2 mills?
reduction of 2 mils, I said.
We're not gonna vote on the 2 mil reduction.
Yes, you will.
We're gonna vote on the 2 mil reduction too.
Right.
That's not-
When you vote yes to increase the income tax by 0.50, it automatically
You're also voting yes to decrease.
decreasing the two mills
Well,
on there.
I'm-
It's, you have this, now it's time to get down to business.
Yeah, but by doing that, you're giving the people that don't pay income tax to the city a tax break on their real estate tax.
That's right.
Well, we could.
Oh, well,
So,
what's wrong with
what's wrong with
that? Son of a
So now we're even
gun!
paying
How would you
less.
people like on fixed incomes to have a little break?
Yeah, we're gonna give all the folks.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Okay, when people on fixed income,
Yeah.
what about people that do have income?
So, they might have income today, but would they have income
Well,
tomorrow?
if they make 50,000, they can afford it, I guess.
Okay, any other discussion?
No, I think Mr. Kirk should wrap it up because it's his. I don't want to. It's his. It's all his. He brought it to the board. Let Mr. Kirk wrap it up because we have to.
When do we have to have the wording in for the legislation to get it on? And which, do we want it on the May ballot or the November ballot?
It's up to us. We can do May or November.
Yeah.
It's whichever one we want, so.
Spring.
Well, I think we should do it on the first one in case it fails, we can put it back on the second.
So what is the political wisdom on May versus November?
Mike, from my experience, I would tell you that any tax measure that you put on the primary ballot has a higher probability of failing than any tax measure that you put on a general election ballot.
Because,
Well, because people typically, there's a lot of beliefs as to why, but typically what happens is you have party politics at play in primary elections, and you have real life impact at play in the general election.
Also, primary folks.
So what happens is in January, if you're showing up and made a vote in the primary and you're a Republican, your issue is going to be about, you're gonna vote your party typically, which is, we want less tax, we want less regulation, we want less of everything. And if you're a Democratic voter, a registered Democrat, typically they will tend to look at issues from a social perspective. Not so much whether or not will it raise my tax, will it lower my taxes, is it gonna raise my taxes for what I believe is the right reason. So you have some of those issues at play in the primary ballots, where typically people who vote in the general election, specifically for local elected officials, typically tend to be pro-community. They may not be pro-Flouty, they may not be anti-Kirk, but they are pro-city.
Okay, since the discussion is winding down,
Wait,
Ms.
wind
Allen
down, but we
Fletcher?
have to get some, we have.
Ms. Fletcher wants to talk to us before we make some decisions, so, I'm sorry, Alan, Alan,
My handwriting his name.
if you would, try and keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Really? Okay. Thank you for allowing some comments. When I put it in, I didn't have anything particular to say, but I knew it generating from the discussion, I probably would. So I would have to say that I want to thank Mayor Flouty for bringing the discussion, and I want to applaud Mr. Kirk's initial comment, which is the citizens need to have a good transmittal of what your vision is. Without a vision transmitted to the city of what you want to do, you're never going to get any money from the city. And as far as I know, this piece of paper is about the only thing most citizens get as far as any kind of communication really from the city. And so if you base it all on this, there's not much communication that comes from council, from city government to the citizens. And I would say without that communication, everybody's going to vote no. Nobody wants to raise taxes. Nobody wants to raise taxes. And so I would say your primary job, if you want to get this passed, is to transmit a vision of why you need the extra funds, what they're going to be used for, what the vision is for the city, assuming that these are permanent, which is, I think, what you caught, if I caught you, this is not just a temporary increase, right? This is a permanent increase. You really need a vision transmitted to the people. So that's what I'd like to say initially. Secondly, I'd have to say I do agree with Mayor Flouty that if I live in Riverside and I work in Dayton, and you decrease that exemption, I forget what you call it, I am going to be greatly impacted. Fairness or no fairness, it's just the majority of the citizens would be greatly impacted from that move. I think you're stuck in a system that says that where you work is where the income tax goes, not where you live, and so you can't control it as the government. That's the system. I don't know how you're going to do anything. Who created that system? I have no idea. But that's what you're stuck with. So, but I think you've got people who live in Dayton, who work in Riverside, you know, who are obviously paying lower because they do that. You've got people, so you got to consider not just how you're going to run government, but how people are going to prosper, and especially in these economic times. So I would say think carefully and communicate well with the citizens on this whole endeavor. So is that my timer? Okay. So one last thing is just a question that you can answer at another time is, I'm not too clear about the bond issues that have come up or the TIFs that have been levied, how they play into this whole thing, if they do or if they don't, and they don't play at all. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you. Okay, now it's been suggested that we wait, and it's been suggested that we do something as far as having an income tax to the ballot. So, anyone want to have a discussion about which one of those we want to do?
Well, I don't think we should wait. We can provide a direction. We can take formal action. And depending on the date that council was set for the issue to appear on the ballot, would determine how much time the city has to get some transparent communication out to the community and when that should start. I think, let me expand a little bit on comments from the city manager about putting something on a ballot at the May primary as opposed to the November general. And he's correct when he talks about the influence of philosophies and positions of political parties, that sort of thing. I think next year has very little, if anything, on the primary because there are local elections as opposed to general elections as far as political candidates and that sort of thing. However, one of the issues that we ran into when I was in a different elected position in this community is that what we learned is that there are 2,000 no votes in our community for any tax issue. 2,000 no votes. They show up every revenue issue that goes on the ballot. And the key is to get out more than 2,000 yes votes. And so typically what you find in a primary election is a shortage of voters, especially in a year when you have only local elections and you don't have statewide or national elections, federal elections. You only have local elections for city council and school boards and that sort of thing. Typically at the primary, you're only going to have tax issues. And you have difficulty getting out your 2,000 plus yes votes. You can go back through, you can go out online to the Board of Elections website and you can go back for several years and take a look at tax issues that have been on the ballot in our community, and you'll see that there are 2,000 no votes on every election, every tax issue. So the key then is when you want to start, how many times you want to attempt it.
What does it cost us each attempt?
There would be a cost for each attempt. I'm thinking November might be the time we need to do it. So, okay, we've had all the discussion at this point.
Well,
Oh,
I think you need to understand or to look at this in perspective. If we reduce the income tax credit by
About 50%.
yeah.
50%, you're only looking at 50 cents per $100 difference that the people in the city of Dayton are going to pay.
I don't think that's true.
75 cents.
75 cents? Okay, 75 cents. That's all you're talking about, 75 cents per $100. That's not a lot of money.
3% versus 1.5%. That's doubling your income tax.
But it's 75
That's a
cents
lot
per
of-
$100.
It's doubling your income
It's,
Okay, that was
it's 3% instead of 2.14%.
tax. Okay, it's 3% versus
2.25%.
Okay, okay.
Now we're back on a different subject again.
Yeah, we're flip-flopping here.
Yeah, let's stay on the same
Let's
subject.
stay on the same subject.
Ballot.
Let's get this on the ballot.
Okay.
That's what's on the table right now.
Right.
Let's stop
That's what
bouncing
the
back and
discussion,
forth.
do we want to do a formal thing, or do we have enough consensus that we should ask the city manager to move forward on,
Okay, we're gonna have,
to do that.
you're gonna have to give him some direction on that one.
Right.
Mr. Kerr?
Am I hearing that despite what happens or may not happen under item 14 unfinished business dealing with the tax credit, that there's sufficient interest in putting an income tax increase on the ballot for next year?
That's what I'm saying.
Yes, there is.
That'll give us
And we
a year
can
to
call
talk
the
to
vote
them.
as soon as we can.
Okay.
1% or a quarter of 1% or how
I
much?
think 0.5.
0.5% is what we've been talking about, 2 mils.
Well, it's 0.005.
Yes, well, okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What, are we going to earmark all and or part of that?
Do we have to decide that right now? What we're asking the city manager to do is move forward
Well,
on this,
no, I-
so we would have that discussion. I think the earmark is something we have to think about very, think
Well,
about.
and I guess. that-
I think you can
that
move
may
forward
depend-
on both.
That may depend on whether or not the other part passes.
Well, you can move both forward.
But it should be reflected in the legislation.
Yes,
The
right.
earmark.
Yeah.
He should be bringing forth, or we need to have further discussion on,
Understand your ability to have further discussion is limited by time.
That's right.
If the issue is that, if it's council's belief that that the citizens will vote for this measure if we properly communicate, I need to know, A, how much, why, and to take that to the people as purpose with all of the other things that we've been able to do. I mean, I could tell you that if you vote on it tonight, we'll easily burn through the next 2.5 months doing nothing but statistical data on past performance of these types of measures and assembling all the necessary data, because we're gonna look at, information in the newsletters, and then we have to begin to prepare all of our print and media information and get all of that prepared for September and October.
I understand
So-
that, but this council has to be informed as to what the ramifications are of earmarking versus not earmarking. And we've had general discussion about that tonight, but I think, that needs to be discussed before we decide that's what we're gonna do. And if we're asking the city manager to get the information together and move forward with having this on the ballot, we can decide if we wanna earmark or not.
We can do that.
One of the steps in dealing with this whole thing is the city gets to generate the ballot language and submit it to the Board of Elections, which sends it to the Secretary of State for approval of the ballot language. And you have time to get that language together and incorporate in it the intent of what the city wants to do.
Right, and as Mr. Fletcher said, we need maybe some vision. And a lot of times we can get that when we have the evaluation of the city manager. That's coming up in January. Maybe we need to have a separate Saturday morning to talk about our vision. The vision and what we want is something that we should consider also. So,
We'll have a year to do that, make
Right.
a decision on
No, we
what,
don't.
how to
well,
word
we
it.
have till August.
Well, the question is, are we writing off May and writing off special elections and just going with the general election in November of next year, or are we considering the May primary?
What does it cost us to put it on the ballot this time? $10,000?
Well,
Well,
the November language, anything on the general ballot in November, as part of the general, it will be relatively minor. I think last year our total actual cost to the county was probably less than $4,000, less than $5,000.
Okay.
Understanding the cost is dependent upon what other measures are on the ballot in the primary. So it could be as much as $50,000 or $60,000. It could be as little as $4,000 or $5,000. We don't know until the county assembles and the BOE assembles
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay,
Ready to go again, ready to
So-
stall.
Where are we going with this?
But you want a motion? Is that what we're looking
the
for?
motion would be
I know,
nice.
Yeah.
I would just like the consensus or a motion, I don't care.
Okay. Well, then let me put it out there.
Okay.
If no one else is gonna do it, let me put it out.
Well, you already got it written down. I'm sorry.
No, this was your game, your time.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Madam Clerk, I've got a copy of this for you. I'll place before the council a motion to have the Riverside staff cause to have placed on the 2013 November general ballot a vote by the Riverside electorate for an increase in the Riverside municipal income tax rate of 0.5% on earned income to create a revised municipal income tax rate of 2% with an effective date of January 1, 2014.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Kirk, seconded by Mr. Schock. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll have a roll call vote, please. Oh, wait, hold on.
One point of discussion here. This is to let the electorate vote on it, and this is on only earned income. So this would not affect, this would not tax Social Security,
Right.
would not tax pensions, would not tax 401ks or other savings distributions, would not be a property tax, would not tax dividends, would not tax interest. This is only on earned income.
And that's the way it is now. Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Kirk?
Yes.
Mr. Shaw?
Yes.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Denny?
Yes.
Mr. Fulenkamp?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Sparky?
Yes. Motion carried. Okay, that is all the work session items that we have for tonight. So at this time then, we will go into recess, and everyone will be back here at 7:45. We are in recess.
Can we hear what he said?
I'd like to call this meeting of the Riverside City Council for Thursday, November 15th, work session to order. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Campbell? Here. Mr. Kirk?
Present.
Mr. Denny?
Here.
Mr. Fulenkamp?
Here.
Mr. Shaw?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mayor Sparky?
Here. Next thing is any additions or corrections to the agenda? Are there any additions or corrections to the revised agenda that we received tonight?
What was that? It's not highlighted.
The addition was we received a request for support from the Stebbins High School Council for the project share. So that was the addition.
That will be the last resolution, Resolution H. Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Been moved by Deputy Mayor Denning, seconded by Ms. Campbell. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion's carried. Next thing on the agenda is discussion of city income tax increase. Mr. Manager?
This item was actually added to the agenda at the request of Councilmember Kirk, so I will defer to him at this time on this matter.
during the year. We started back as early as March. This year, we've had several other discussions. At the most recent meeting, we had a discussion and a vote on whether or not to adjust the reciprocity tax credit that we provide. To date, we've done nothing affirmative as far as putting something out there in front of the citizens. One of the things that has come up on several occasions in discussions is that some people want to have the citizens take a vote on these things, and yet nobody's brought forward anything for the citizens to vote on. Someone said we need to go out in the community and have community discussions with the citizens about the city's needs and the revenue enhancements. We've had one put together meetings to go out into the community. So I thought we'll bring this back to the agenda and see if we can get some discussion around just what it is council members want to do as far as A, communicating with the community, and B, putting something out there on the ballot for the citizens to take a look at.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Before we go on, if anyone wants to have to say something during the work session, we please need to fill out a slip over there and pass it up to either side of the diocese. Mr. Foncamp?
At this point, I would like to make a presentation specifically about the tax credit. So if we could fire up the projector.
Jack Friedman.
Make sure you put this in the big screen.
You don't want everybody squinting at it. Yeah.
But shouldn't we discuss what Ken Kirk brought
Yeah,
up
let's
first?
just do the
Well-
ballot first.
I mean,
Talk about the ballot.
Well,
I mean, you jumped right in there with your
Yeah.
presentation. I mean, it's up to
No.
Mr. Kirk. It's his,
Yeah, let's finish that.
it's, you know.
what would you like me to do?
Well, I don't care where the discussion goes, just so the discussion goes, because what has happened is that we've had discussions and then we let things rest and we don't come back to them. And my point, again, is that if there are things that council members want to put on the ballot out in front of citizens to get citizen votes, then I'm open to hearing what council members have in mind. But because so far I haven't heard anything over the last 10, 11 months. So I'm interested in hearing, because all we're getting is, to some degree, rejections as opposed to constructive ideas as to what we should put out there.
I know.
Mr. Trout?
I know in the past, we have talked about putting on the ballot an income tax, increase, but we never figured out exactly how much. But also, we talked about if we do, there's a couple old mills we want to take off, on it. But what we need to figure out, if we all want to put it on the ballot and let the citizens decide, if they want to increase the taxes, figure out how much. And I think we talked about 0.5.
Yeah, we did on May 18th.
Yes.
We have revenue enhancements options, and the first option was to increase the city income tax by 0.5% from 1.50 to 2, and that would bring in 1.15 million annually, which I think that's a thing we should do, actually.
It'd be like a nickel on the dollar. On
I don't know about-
0.5.
Okay. So, yeah, so I think that's a good option. We need revenue, we know that, and so putting it out to the citizens, I think is the right thing to do.
Well, we haven't raised it since what, 2000, around that area? I know we haven't raised it since I've been
It's
in
been even earlier than
2006.
that.
And everything's going up and up, and if we get a little something to help us get some things done.
And I think we could sell that to the voters, because Burkhart Road, if we go with Burkhart Road, which I think we are, and we're gonna go Harshman Road, it's gonna take us down to about $2 million or less. And so, I think the citizens will be appreciative of knowing that we've tried as hard as we can, we have no money left, and we need some revenue. I think the citizens will hear that and be agreeable to that.
Well, I think we need to designate where the money's gonna go. I think the hard part is when you increase it, say 0.5% or whatever that number may be, how do you determine how much different money generated next year versus this year was actually the increase to go towards the whatever you might earmark it for? And I cannot take the credit for earmarking. I was speaking to Councilman Denning, and he mentioned that if we raised the income tax, that we earmarked it for a specific project, that would probably go over better with the community. And it just so happened earlier this week, I was talking to a resident, and he brought up the same idea. I did not prompt him. He brought up the same idea about earmarking towards a project. That way there the residents could see where their money was going. And I think that's an excellent idea. I'm sure Mr. Councilman Denning has more ideas and thoughts on this. But I think if we, like I say, earmark it for a specific project or projects, I think that would make a big difference.
I thought we would wanna, when we were discussing about getting things done, Election Valley, Brook Park, Harrisburg, all these other places.
Well,
Starting with the worst one first.
that could be, you could do it with a,
I don't think, we should just put it in the general fund and go with it.
well, we could
But
make it
it's-
capital improvements, which would include
That's fine,
recurring.
that's fine.
And
But I would go with
replace the
what?
police cars.
The worst one first.
Capital improvements, yes.
Well, yeah, you mark down your percentages, like, you know, how much percentage of the dollar is gonna go here, just like, you know, we have done, done in the past, how we take a dollar, break it down, where's it all, you know, spent at, what department, you know, takes the most, what department's efficient, and so on, you know, on there. But, you know, the other thing too, I know, Brian, that we had talked about a couple old mills that we need to take off too, on there. And when we did talk about, you know, here a while back, we talked about that once again, I don't know if I'm being redundant, that 0.5% increase and with trade-off of removing 2 mills on property tax. And that's the way I would like to see it go.
Then the citizens would then see that savings also, so.
Well, yeah,
that
citizens
will-
on it, you
will
are
then
correct.
also-
They will see that citizens on their property tax deed. But, you know, but again, you know, earmarking, oh yeah, that's being responsible,
only
showing
thing-
exactly what we're doing with the money.
Mr.
I have a question for the manager. If we take it out to the citizens for a vote, can we, and I'm looking at the way the last 0.5% was added, and we said, at the time, we earmarked it fire and police, and I believe the intention was actually 0.25% for the fire and 0.25% for the police, and the way it ends up in the budget is whoever needs the most this year is where it gets divvied out. And I was wondering if we go out for whatever additional percentage we get, if we could change that earmarking at the same time, or is that a separate issue, or
Yeah.
once it's done, or, you understand my,
I do. The way that we distribute the 0.5% of income tax that's specifically designated for police, fire, and EMS is there is no legislative definition as to how that money is divided, only that it is spent on those purposes. Now, in my tenure, what we have done is we have divided that as a proportion of the budget. So when you look at if the police budget is 2/3 of the fire budget, then 1/3 of the income tax goes to fire, 2/3 goes to police. So we divide it proportionally based on the department's total operational needs. So it's not done willy-nilly. I don't necessarily know if you would need to specifically designate either as a percentage, the distribution of that as a percentage, because both fire fund and police fund still require large subsidies from the general fund.
Don't they
So you could specifically earmark all of a 1%, if you will, income tax to the police fund, and the police fund would still need a subsidy from the general fund, as would the fire. So, you know, what it does by adding that extra 0.5% to police, fire, and EMS, it reduces the subsidy required by the general fund, but it will not eliminate it, even with an additional 0.5%, regardless of how you were to divide it. So you could spend all of it on the general fund, or it's not on the general, you could spend all of it on the fire fund, and the balance would go to the police fund. However, but at the end of the day, the restriction is still, it has to be one or the other.
I thought there was a levy for them in particular.
Them
Not the
being,
general fund.
well, both the police fund and the fire fund have property tax levies specifically designated for their fund. The fire has 5, which go back to the mid-70s, 76 times 2, 79, 80 something, and then again in 92, I believe. Those were all fire. And then there is the police millage, the 4.95, which was renewed back in 2010, tax year 2010. So those, you know, those are still needed sources of revenue to some degree because of the age of the fire taxes, those millages. The effective rate isn't the actual approved rate. So over the course of time, let's say 1976, it was 1 mil, and in 1976, that full 1 mil was paid to the fire fund. Well, over the course of the last 30 some odd years, because of inflation and whatnot, the actual effective rate of that 1 mil, still on the books at 1 mil, is actually 0.2 mils. Okay, so there are property tax revenues specifically designated for each fund, but again, they're just not enough.
When you say the mill was a full 1 mil 30 years ago, and now today it's down maybe 0.2, is that based on value yearly or every so often, or does it reduce in value based on property values?
It is, the way that the rule works is that a property tax tomorrow can bring in no more than it did on the day that it was first levied, okay? So what happens is as property values have escalated, the mathematical formula requires the millage as a factor to be reduced to offset the inflational increase in value of property relative to the actual dollars it brings in. Does that make sense?
So if I paid $100 in '76, I still only pay $100 this year.
In 1976
$1976
dollars today.
Then I pay $100 in taxes today.
That's correct.
It doesn't increase because of the value of my home.
That is correct, yes.
It stays at the $100 or $10 a month or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So,
That didn't really answer my question. My question, can we, what you're saying is, it wouldn't really make a difference to re-juggle those numbers.
Correct.
The question was, could we?
I don't see a reason why you couldn't. I'd have to consult with the law director. I don't see why you couldn't. But the need is there regardless of whether or not you
Okay.
designate it.
And my biggest suggestion would be that the one thing that when we ran numbers, I don't remember, it was May, March, whatever, the magic number that came up with capital improvements and the stuff that we needed, the number, at least I think I extrapolated, was $3 million is what we needed to keep things rolling and keep things, and still be able to do our streets and actually have a plan to get all the residential streets done and things like that over, and that was going for, I think I stretched that out 10 or 15 years, and that was still going to need, we were still going to need $3 million a year additional to what we're taking in now to be able to do that if we want to do that. Or we need to decrease something else to level all that out. And that's, Mr. Mayor, that's so that we can, we're doing Burkhart and Harshman now, and that's because we saved up the money and did it. But to have a plan to move forward, all these streets in this city, we're now, 20 years old as a city, and we haven't had a street levy to be able to go out there and actually have a plan to go through and do Arrow Rock and Spinning
Well, I
and
understand
all
that,
the
but-
other streets. So the additional money, if we earmark it for capital improvements, we would be able to have that plan to move forward. But the way I look at it right now is you've got 5,000 people in this city that live here and pay taxes other places and don't pay for any of that. Okay, anything that goes on here because they're paying the income tax in other cities. And then we want to add 0.5% to everybody that's already paying taxes, and those other 5,000 people still won't pay any taxes because most of them are working in Dayton and they're already paying 2.25%, and we're giving them 100%.
But even if we do both, we're not gonna get $3 million, we're only gonna get.
No, but that doesn't mean that we can't figure out other ways to pull in or make do with, and maybe it'll take us 30 years to do all the streets, and maybe it'll only cost us $2 million a year. But at least we've got something to move forward with. And if we don't do something, these streets are gonna fall out from underneath us. So I guess I really don't, as long as we're earmarking it for capital improvements so that we can keep our police cars on the road, our new fire trucks, and our streets being repaved, and I really believe that's where we need to focus. I think we should ask the folks out there if they're willing to pay that extra 0.5% to have those things done. But we do need to earmark it and tell them what we're gonna do with that money if they give it to us.
But we're already, this year we're in the hole, not quite $1 million.
Operationally, we're right around 620, 640 based on the memo we sent relative to the October 18th budget discussion. I did indicate in that memo, our original operational projection was $720,000 in the negative. And the way that we were able to increase some expense items and reduce that deficit was to draw on resources in other funds, okay, like the permissive tax fund, okay? So we were able to drop that down. So I would say following 2013 and 2014, you're probably gonna see that number come back around the $700,000.
So if we earmark it, we're gonna have to make sure we cover that operational deficit, which we could do if we do it right, I guess.
Well, the other side of that is, and we all understand that we do have some capital improvements built into even our future budget. So if we earmark it for capital improvements, it'll have somewhat of a trickle down. Stuff that we were going to, capital improvements we were going to take out of the general fund won't be taken out of there because it'll come out of the earmark stuff. So we give a little bit to the general fund. That's my understanding.
So it can be done.
Is that, my logic somewhat?
You would be talking,
Probably not the full amount, but.
you would be able to, with the income tax, if you went wholly on the income tax, if you went a quarter, let me make sure I've got. Okay. Based on current projections, if you marked a 1/4% towards, an income tax, if you marked a 1/4% towards operations, that would mathematically eliminate the operational debt and would provide you, or deficit, and would provide you another $700,000 annually towards capital improvements, whether or not those were streets or equipment or whatever the case might be. Now, understand that if you are going to specifically mark those 1/4% on the ballot, your language is going to be very cumbersome. So that's just something to keep in mind. And you may also wind up, if you're gonna separate them, you may wind up with one and not the other. You may wind up seeing people vote for the 1/4% for capital, but you may not see a corresponding vote in support of the
But we wouldn't
operation.
have to separate it out so that you vote for a 1/4% of the.
You don't have to, but that was the point of conversation that Mr. Denning brought forward, is if you mark it towards something, that's what people want. They wanna know.
Can we mark it towards something and not have it on the ballot, exactly like what we're marking it for, just?
Yes.
I think
I mean, yeah, you can, through legislation, I mean, I mean, the law director would, agree upon that. But we don't have to just put it on the ballot, it's a simple 5%, tax increase.
Point five.
Point five. Let me get the point in front of it. You gotta have your, no, 5. No, here's what, here's okay, yeah. Okay, anyhow, 0.5, I'll keep that in mind, 0.5, 0.5, income tax, just put that on the ballot with taking away 2 mills.
And we're gonna
Simple.
tell them
Just keep it-
exactly what we're gonna do.
In
That
our-
legislatively, right after the vote is affirmative.
Right.
We do legislation that says this is how we want it divided.
Correct.
I think you'll run into problems with that if you're going to specifically throw it on the ballot as 0.5%. And relax, citizens, trust us, we'll do, right?
No, and hold on, don't throw that game out, trust me, I'm your local politician, who worked there.
That's not necessarily a good thing.
But anyhow, no, it's when we go out there and lobby for it, and say, this is what we're gonna do. This is why the council wants the 0.5%, tax increase, because we are gonna do this and this and this with it. When it passes, then we go ahead and legislate, this and this and this with that percentage.
Well, wouldn't you legislate beforehand?
No,
Can we
you
do
don't
it
want to,
beforehand?
you don't,
Why wouldn't we
when
want
you get in the ballot,
legislation beforehand?
well, because you don't want to get there on that ballot box, as Brian brought up a very good point, with all this stuff written on it, on everything.
I think if we're going to put a 0.5% on, it needs to be set aside for capital improvements.
You can put it as,
we don't-
as-
we have
Capital improvements include so much stuff. I mean, it includes roads, it includes equipment, it includes fire equipment, it includes police equipment. I mean, it's a very, I mean, it gives us quite a bit of money to be able to spend that funding, okay? And funding that we're already spending on those things can then be left in the general fund for operations. That's my view.
Mr. Falk.
So, Mr. Manager, currently in our kind of stripped out capital expenses budget that we have right now, how much really, I mean, do we know how much we're investing in capital right now? In this budget,
In 2012 or 2013?
Yeah, right now. Well, or
Either one.
Or either one, because
Okay.
just subtract out the road projects, I guess.
In 2013, the only real capital items that we have budgeted for, the larger capital items that we budgeted for, is the Harshman project and the Burkhardt project. Vastly, that is what you could outright consider capital improvements. Now, for instance, we have $20,000 in next year's budget to repair the Harshman wall. Some people might consider that capital, some people might consider that maintenance operational.
So we're not investing in police cars,
say if you wanna look at capital specifically, you have $54,000 for 2 cardiac monitors, you have $70,000 for, in-car, cameras, and,
Did we get 3 new police cars? Or we have budget for
no, sir. And then you also have $40,000 to, modify 1 vehicle in the service department.
So we might have $153,000 total.
Maybe, yeah.
Budgeted next year, for what we might call capital lines.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
My question is, would we be hurting ourselves eliminating that, 2 mills off the real estate tax? Because that money now is going to the police department, the fire department.
Correct.
Where if the income tax increase is passed, that would be going towards capital improvements. So we'd still have to take more money out of the general budget, put it over on the fire department side.
It's possible the effective rate of the mills to be reviewed will be significantly smaller than 2%.
Right.
I think it was
But
a-
actual,
What, the mills bring us what, $50,000? I have it here.
It was minimal.
It was minimal, very minimal.
Well,
$50,000 for a mill,
compared to 1.15 million.
Yeah.
We would get an income tax. Probably a fair trade. What do you think, Mr. Fulenkamp?
Well, I'm not real hot on pandering.
the, let me see here, okay. I've got the sheet. Let's talk fire. 1976 fire.
45,000.
The time that that millage rate was approved, it was half a mil, 0.5 mils. Today, the effective rate on residential property is 0.14. It generated $45,000 in 1976. It generates $45,000 and change today. The other mill, or the other 1976 fire levy was 0.89 mils in 1976. Today, the effective rate is 0.25, and that generates $80,500.
So 125,000. 80 plus 45 is 125,000 we would be losing if we took those 2 mills off, but we'd be gaining 1.15 million.
Something like that, yes. Close, an approximate.
So you get times 10 your money.
Is that the direction council would like to go?
Well, I think, are you talking about an income tax, or are you talking about earmarking?
Well,
When you asked the question about the direction you want to go.
well, let's start with the,
All the above.
Both.
well,
All the above.
And I guess my thing is, I don't care what it's earmarked for, as long as it's earmarked, because I think I think people want to know what we're gonna do with their money.
Well, I'm not opposed to earmarking if we can earmark it to an area where, in the end, it doesn't get restricted to the point where it can't be spent for the betterment of the citizens.
I agree.
Because one of the things, if you watch the education landscape over the last couple of years with school levies, you have some communities that have operating levies and they have capital levies. So money builds up in the capital fund that they don't spend. They run out of money in the operating fund, and so the citizens want to know, well, why can't you use the capital money for operations instead of coming back to the voters for a new tax issue? And so the thing I think we should be cautious about is that if we put it in capital, if we earmark something for capital and we can't spend the capital money and we run in the red in the operating fund, then we have an issue with the citizens over, well, we gave you this money and we don't care how you categorize it, we gave you money, you got enough money to spend it on the operational needs.
right. That's why I mean, I don't mind earmarking, or at least having the information when we go to them, that this is how we want to spend it. But to earmark it on the ballot, like the manager said, that will cause the ballot to be cumbersome. And like Mr. Kerp said, then you have no way of moving it if you need it somewhere else, and that could cause problems for our city down the road.
Well, I think you're gonna need to put a time limit on this earmark. So, go to 5 years, or 10 years, whatever the number may be. That way you're not restricted, for the rest of the life of the city with that 0.5% income tax.
Again, that could get cumbersome.
No,
What if an
Well,
emergency came up?
I think you
and
need
had
to-
money for,
It might be helpful if you separate the need. Because you have two needs. You have an operational need and you have a capital need. And just, whether or not you're for it or against either component tonight, the math works out in the following way. If you repeal the credit by 50%, that would generate roughly $700,000. That covers the operational need. The capital component, which is something that you can easily display to residents. If you had a 0.5% income tax on the ballot and you provided it as a 5-year sunset, that would generate $7.3 million, roughly, that would specifically be dedicated to public infrastructure. And everybody then knows what that money's gonna go for. And if council is committed to making sure that both of those needs are met, if things go well for us and the economy goes well, you can always legislatively reduce the credit based on the operational needs of the city. You can do that annually. Raise the credit or lower the credit in response, because there are still things afoot that even we can't predict. And right now, a prime example, in my last manager's report, I provided you information on House Bill 601, which is scheduled to make changes to income tax uniformity related to net loss carry forward and the 12-day rule. Both of those would be losers for this city. We have not run our projections here, but Kettering, who's already lost $4 million because of cuts in the estate tax and in local government fund, projects to lose $900,000 annually based on those two changes. Centerville, which has already lost $2.9 million because of the estate tax and the reductions in local government fund, predicts to lose another $700,000 to $750,000 based on changes to net loss carryover and the 12-day rule being extended to 20 days. So those are things that we also have to be cognizant of. I mean, the state is not done passing their problems on to us.
But if we do that, if we would do both, that would be 0.75 and 0.5, that'd be 1.25% increase to many of our citizens. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that's the right thing to do. We need to ask them for a levy rather than do it legislatively.
Well, and I'm not necessarily saying that that's the way that council could go. You could go 0.25 on if you want to look at it all from an income tax perspective. 0.25 gets you $730,000 in additional revenue. Send that to general fund, police, fire, combination of public safety, and then you can ask for the community support related to capital. Okay. The issue that you have to be cognizant of is that if the community says no, we as a city, as administration and council, we need to have a plan B. Because we have partly gone about being a responsible government. We have, changed dispatch. We are moving away from traditional health insurance to an HSA. Through attrition, we've cut 10 positions in the last 5 years. We have done all of the things that need to be done, and we haven't made a big deal about it because that's our job, that's our responsibility to do the
And
right
if we
thing.
tell the citizens we've done that, and I feel they'll be responsive to it. They will.
Yes.
So I think that's what we need to be doing.
Understanding they may be, but we need to have a plan B in the event that they are not. Because they may be under the assumption that our finance department is not 2 people, that it's 10 people.
We have to educate.
They may be under the assumption that our police department is not 30 people, it's 60 people, and that there is room left available. And previously, when we have gone out to talk with citizens, and when we've invited citizens to come forward and learn about the things that we have done to be responsible government, the turnout for those is significantly disproportionate to those who show up at the polls.
But we have, we lost.
Previously, we had. In my time here, there was just the one time and we were successful, but prior to that, I think if you look back at the council dockets,
Took 3 tries.
there were several attempts that failed before that one was successful.
Because it's how it was presented. It was not presented as
It was
a
not
actual,
presented
factual, this is what it's, why we need it, and this is what we're gonna do with it. This is why this council is so stuck on, we wanna tell people exactly what we're gonna do with it, on there. And I hear Mr. Kirk down there talking about, he is correct too, you don't wanna back yourself in a corner where you can't do anything. We just might say general operation on it, but again, you think of the other side of the coin too, we've got so much capital improvement, it's gonna take us years to get done.
It's gonna take us 20 years to
On
redo
it.
these streets.
So, I'm falling back to, doing the capital improvement. Cause that's only the 0.5%, of the total income tax that we are allocating to only capital improvement. And I don't think it's gonna really hurt us.
We'll still have a deficit, operating deficit, because we won't be able, as the manager said, we're only using $200,000 for capital. So we're gonna get 1.5
But we're gonna have so much to do
million.
in the capital to improve
But we
it.
still have operational problems. That's the problem.
So the point of it is,
It's a catch-22.
for the purpose of dramatics, you'll have all these nice new roads, but 2 years from now, you won't have anybody to put in a plow truck and keep them clean after 3 o'clock.
So really, to be safe, we need to allocate 0.5%, get better at that, to general operation, period. That way, we can move that money where we need to move it, and we're not, we can move it for capital improvements and still keep lights on.
I think what I've heard so far tonight is if we passed the legislation that's in here later tonight, that would give us $750,000, which would keep our operating levy and balance our budget. And then if we pass the 0.5% for capital improvements, and it takes us, it would take us 20 years to get all the streets in this city done, and then it'd be time to start over.
But again, you play it safe, because you're depending on the economy improving. I'm not depending on the economy improving. I'm planning on it getting worse in the next 4 years. I'm not planning on it getting better. So that's the way we gotta look at it. That's the way I'm looking at it, on it. It's gonna take a long, hard road to improve what's been going on here, on the state level.
And you're asking
In the federal government.
all the folks out there that vote to trust us with their money.
Will they do anyhow when they elect us?
If you pass a thing tonight, that's what you're telling them to, trust us, so we're gonna raise your taxes and trust us, we're gonna spend it.
No, we're not raising them on everybody.
Everybody who has.
Well, we're still,
Okay.
no,
It's okay.
it's just, they trust us. Let's put it this way, they do. But we just gotta make it transparent what we do with it. And the general operation, I'm agreeing with Mr. Kirk, I don't you know, we just put it on the general operation expenses, and then we work it from there.
Ms. Campbell?
Well, you know, we never know when an emergency might come up. Maybe there'll be something out there get damaged, we have to go take care of it right now.
And then if then we can do what that we're wanting, some of us are wanting to do tonight. We can take away credit if we get into an emergency situation. If we do it the other way around, I don't think we're gonna get both paths.
No, I don't want, no, we're not gonna
To
do
try and do
both.
both, would be, I don't think we could get it passed.
We just give it to the voters, let them decide, we'll do all we need to do, information, what we're gonna do with the money.
Tell
Why
them
we
what we're
actually
gonna
do
do with
this
the money.
type of increase, and let them decide.
And what are we gonna do with the money?
We'll tell them.
What have you been griping about?
No, that's what I'm asking.
What you been griping
You
about?
just told me you weren't. You told me you were gonna put $750,000 in general fund. That's not gonna leave us enough to do capital improvements.
That's correct.
Because it was gonna cost us like $1.5 million a year to be able to get every street in this city done in 20 years. It'll take 20 years to do that at $1.5 million a year.
That's the way we have to do it, and we just put it in the general fund and work it down to the streets. Well, we are gonna get the main streets done and try to work into the, you know, the interplats in the city, I guess. Mr. Kerb, what else you got to say?
Well, I
Mr.
think-
Fulton, well, okay,
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Kirk.
think,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I just curious what he,
I just think if everyone has felt they've digested this enough, then it might be time to listen to Mr. Folkamp's information he brought forward on the tax credit.
Make a decision.
We want to finish this.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Fulton.
and, give me the, you got it.
no, you're.
Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about revenue enhancement for the city of Riverside, and the one that